I've just been around books pretty much forever. Either from my grandmother reading with me when I was a kid, my mom reading with me, my dad reading with me. And in second grade, I realized when my teacher passed out little construction paper journals for us to use every week that I loved writing.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back. It is Wednesday, your favorite time, and your favorite time is Leaders Talk Time. And here I am again, your intrepid host, Andrew Dupy. And I usually say that I have a special guest, but today I have a very special guest. In fact, today I have a very extra, massively special guest, and that is S.J. Lomas. And S.J. Lomas is a special guest because I have known her since I was all of 19 years old. So she is a very dear and close friend of mine. But I'm still going to give you the buy the book introduction here, and then we can actually get into the fun introduction after that. So S.J. Lomas is a cheerful, very cheerful Michigan girl who writes strange and somewhat dark young adult fiction. She loves books so much she not only writes them, but she became a librarian and a book reviewer. Our current book is Winter Chills, which just released very recently. And SJ, welcome. Let us know a little bit about yourself. Well, let's just kind of roll in there and we can talk about whatever we want to.
Excellent. Thank you for that wonderful introduction and very kind. It's so awesome to be here with you after all of these years.
I know.
We don't look that much older than when we met, obviously.
You don't look that much older.
No, you look the same. It's great. So yeah, I am a librarian. I've been in libraries since I was 16, so a little before I met you. And I've just been around books pretty much forever. Either from my grandmother reading with me when I was a kid, my mom reading with me, my dad reading with me. And in second grade, I realized when my teacher passed out little construction paper journals for us to use every week that I loved writing. So I looked forward to those little journals every week. And that's what started in my brain that, wow, I'm going to be a writer one day. But I, obviously stuck with books and libraries all this time, and a reader all this time, and a reviewer all this time. And it wasn't until my daughter was born, and I knew at that time I wanted to write picture books. And I remember holding her in my lap and reading a board book with her and thinking to myself, oh, one day I'll be able to read her my picture books together. And then something snapped in my brain and I was like, what picture books? I haven't written any. I don't have anything to read to her. If I don't do it, there's never going to be anything to read to her. So I made her nap times my productive time, which they say you're not supposed to do as a new mother. You're supposed to sleep when the baby sleeps, or you work when the baby sleeps. And I went with working. So she's 17 now. I've done a few books and a few novels, and I'm still going.
Oh, way to make us both feel a little dated there.
Right? Yeah.
But that's so fascinating because I do hear this story a lot of someone that, early on in their life, they decide, hey, I want to be a writer, but then it's 20, 30 years down the road before they actually make that decision. And sometimes it's too late in many cases for them to be able to take that off. So other than just what you told us right now, what was it that made you feel confident enough to actually take that first step and begin that process?
I was very lucky that I had a lot of teachers in high school and in college that supported my writing. So when I turned in papers, they put a little extra note on it, like, this is fantastic. The writing on this is excellent. A plus, you could do something with this. So it probably sounds terrible, but all of that built me up to make me feel like, you know what, I can do this. Like, people that aren't related to me think that I can write at least decently for them. I mean, compared to the rest of a class who may not be interested in writing, maybe it wasn't a very high bar anyway. But still, I loved it. And I just decided that was a thing that was important to me. I'm very big on not having regrets. I don't know if it's a writer's brain or just a weird quirk of my own, but I'm always like, what am I going to worry about on my deathbed? And I know it's not going to be cleaning the house. I'm never going to be like, oh, I wish I'd clean the kitchen more often. No, that's never going to happen. But maybe I would think, oh, I wished I'd written that book, or, I'd written 20 books or whatever it is. So that helped me with an idea that I'd been kicking around. So I did a picture book based on my daughter, and close to the same time, I started my first novel, which was a young adult novel called Dream Girl, which came to me in a dream when I was in college. Something I'd been plucking away at for years. And I thought, I keep coming back to this story. There must be something to it. I mean, I have half finished notebooks all over the house. I still like to do my initial notes by hand. So I'll start taking notes. I'll write a chapter or two, and that initial excitement will fizzle away. But this story, I kept coming back. I'm like, well, let's go back to that Dream Girl book. Let's go back to that Dream Girl book. But there must be something here. I better finish the book. So that was sort of what got me to really do it, and thinking, I don't want to be on my deathbed and go, oh, I never wrote that book. So many people say that. I mean, even as a writer, the people that walk up and are like, oh, if I had time, I could write a book. Like, you're never going to have time. You have to squeeze it in around the rest of your life. I keep notebooks in the car when I'm dropping the kids off at school, when I'm picking the kids up, even if it's 15 minutes. Well, it's 15 minutes to scribble some notes around my book. Keep it in the back of my head when I'm cooking dinner. If I still have energy before I go to bed, maybe I can scribble a little bit more down. So you have to squeeze it in. At least that's how it works for me.
Well, you are, in some cases you're rare because you already had that idea of, thinking from the perspective of what else is going to happen if I don't do it, rather than should I ever do it. So speak to me a little bit about that. I mean, you're in a position of becoming a writer, you're starting out. Did that ever enter into your mind, the fear of what's going to happen if I don't actually actualize this and do it?
Yeah, well, I knew I would have that regret forever.
Right.
I guess I'm very regret adverse. So I keep that in my mind. So when it's like, what's more important? And I was very lucky that I had a very supportive husband. So when it came down to do another load of laundry or sit down for 2 hours and write this book. So, he could, I work part-time. So I could throw that in, that I'm not working a 40 to 60 hour a week job and juggling the kids and, trying to be a traditional mother and housekeeper and all of that. So I do have some extra flexibility there, but still just the idea of, I want to do this for my children too. I want them to see that mom's not just mom. She also writes these crazy ideas, and, she gets them published and other people read them, and some people like them and some people don't, but that's okay if she's doing what she loves to do. So that was very important to me. And the loss of not doing it because I was too busy or too scared that I wasn't good enough or no one would ever read it. It was just not worth it. And getting people to read it is still hard. Those first bad reviews are always terrible. They're always going to come. I mean, you can look at reviews for the bestsellers, your favorite books ever, classics. They still get horrible 1-star reviews. Right. So, you got to feel the pain for a little bit, but then let it go.
Well, that's something that a lot of new authors, they get scared of when they begin to approach it. Even ones that, like you, already have kind of an innate ability to write. When they actually begin the process of, okay, what is it going to take to publish this book, to actually write it, and not just write it, but to get it seen, to get it distributed, it becomes kind of a frightening ball. They see that publishing isn't just you write and then it's out. There's a whole lot more to it out there. How did you approach that? And did that scare you? How did you get over that?
That was kind of awful. That is the worst part of all, because in your head, like you finish your manuscript and like the heavens open and the rays of light come down, you hear the chorus singing and there's confetti and you're like, I did it. I wrote the best book that's ever been written. And you have maybe 15-20 minutes when you're in this beautiful glow. And then I call it, this happens with all of my books, there's a self-loathing phase. So after you've done that, you come back to it and you're like, this is terrible. This is the worst book that's ever been written. What was I thinking? I don't know how to do this. I can't send this to anyone. And usually I just let that last as long as it's going to last. It's usually a couple weeks for me until I can go back and look again and say, no, it's not all terrible. Obviously, there's stuff I want to fix. So then I go back and working on it, trying to find where to send it to. And there's so many choices these days too on which way you want to go. Do you want to go the traditional route? Do you want to find a hybrid publisher? Do you want to go it alone? And there's a lot of research involved with all of those options. So it's not like traditional, it's just, oh, I'll just send it out. Somebody will offer me a 6-figure deal and I'll be a bestseller.
Yeah, I want to concentrate on that a little bit because you're coming at it from the perspective of a fiction author. We have quite a few fiction authors that have been featured on this podcast, but Leaders Press is very obviously our main imprint is business authors and nonfiction. But yeah, even for fiction authors, it's really starting to become that the traditional route of publishing is not really the best or necessarily the most ideal way to go anymore, is it?
No, I see so many frustrated posts from authors on, well, Twitter is now X, but whatever social media you follow.
Just call them muskies now instead of tweets.
Exactly. So people are so sad because, it's demoralizing. You spend a lot of time writing your book. It's a lot of emotional energy. It's a lot of physical energy writing your book, and you send it out. And either you hear nothing at all, which is the standard. So traditional publishers cover their butts with that. Like, if you don't hear from us within 12 weeks, it's a no. Like 12 weeks is a long time to just be sitting around and imagining, did they read it 15 minutes after I sent it and they knew right then and there they weren't going to publish it? And I'm waiting 12 more weeks to get no answer and then just assume, well, I guess they read it and didn't like it. And you also hear from people who literally get responses a year later that, oh, I finally got to your submission. I mean, some people have had it published elsewhere. Some people have shelved it by then. It's like, what do you mean a year later? I don't want your book. It's horrible. It's demoralizing every step of the way. And you just feel like you have no power. Nobody wants that.
Exactly. And I'm not going to rag on traditional publishing. And we send referrals to traditional publishers. We've had good relationships with several of them, but they have their own interests at heart with what the market currently wants right now. And that doesn't necessarily always align with the author's interests. I mean, unless you're a huge name, unless you're Stephen King, unless you're in nonfiction, someone like Elon Musk or Richard Branson that already has a massively established brand, when you're with a traditional publisher, you're surrendering an enormously large amount of power.
Yes, you are. And a lot of people don't realize you with that loss of power, you have creative control that's gone. A lot of people are surprised to know that authors don't get to choose their covers and sometimes have no input on that whatsoever. I have friends that debuted and were so ashamed of their books because they thought the cover was hideous that they just sort of, put that on the bottom of their bookshelf and like didn't even want to tell anybody that like my first book came out. So like, oh, I hate how it looks. You're excited about that. And you're like, look at my hideous book. You want to buy it? Because I wouldn't.
And that's where I think that self-publishing and hybrid publishing, and obviously vested interest in the hybrid publishing, go with Leaders Press, everybody. But I mean, we clearly we want people to look at what we do, and our Story Leaders imprint would be one that would be relevant to an author like you. But yeah, with that, I think the stigma is going away on self-publishing and hybrid publishing, and I will rag on traditional a little bit. They continue to press that they are the right way to do things. And that has been they have a little bit of a media thing like the New York Times bestseller list and all that that's a love fest that says if you don't do it our way, you're not doing it right.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe that's the case because you've had success in using other avenues.
Yes. And readers these days are more open to things. As more resources are available to authors, they can make books themselves with freelancers or through using companies like Leaders Press to make something that looks just as good or not better than a traditionally published book. So it used to be you'd look at a self-published book and be like, I can tell that's self-published. The cover's not so great. Oh, the formatting is hard on my eyes. No, thanks. Good for you. But these days, the formatting is top-notch. The stories are top-notch. The covers look fantastic. So a lot of your average reader doesn't even see a difference between a self-published, hybrid published, or a traditionally published. And I don't know if it's just post-pandemic. I sort of feel like everybody's brain died a little bit. But the published books I read, there's a lot of typos in them. Still, the final product, it's not even advanced books. I'm like, well, look at this. Like I'm counting up 10 wrong instances of a homophone. They spelled the wrong word when it should have been this one, or the is in there twice, or the isn't in there at all. Like, who looked at this? How did it get through all of their levels and nobody noticed this stuff? So the quality might be coming down in traditional and the quality is coming up in self-published and independent. So maybe they're meeting in the middle now, which is good for all of us.
And that's exactly where I was kind of going with that, because when you're doing work like, let's say, with a hybrid publisher like us, you are actually in a situation where you get to do things like choose the cover. You get to work directly with the editor. It's not sent off to an editor without your input, and you get to have a little bit of actual back and forth. And yeah, the process still can be painful, just like you say when you have that moment of, oh my gosh, my book is terrible. I can't almost every client, everybody back there that's behind me on my trophy case, they all had that moment as well when they were even when they were working with writing help. They all had that moment of, oh my gosh, no, this is terrible, this isn't going to go well. But when you have help, when you have support, when you're doing it yourself and you're actually creating the book yourself, I think that becomes a little bit easier. Yes,
I think so, because it's nice to know that you're not going to get pigeonholed into something or forced into something that doesn't feel good, because some people with traditional publishers, your publisher has a completely different vision for a certain scene or a character or even a subplot. I had a friend who wrote a book about parental alcoholism that was very important to her. She sent it out to publishers and they're like, if it doesn't have any magic in it, it's not going to sell. And, it's like, that's not even the point of this book. This is to help real children that are out there coping with this. They need a realistic story that shows them that they can grow up and live successful lives.
That would be like somebody reading a book that I wrote about the loss of my parents. Like, what this really needs? It needs a space battle.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, could your parents have not died for cancer, and could they have actually been killed by a Darth Vader-ish character?
Right. Yeah, because that's more exciting. Come on, we want more exciting. We don't want real life tragedy.
Yeah.
But like that brought her down for a long time because traditional still has this clout, like you say, because it's still out there. That's the right way. Yeah. We know what we're doing. So for a while, she was like, well, what am I doing? I thought I wanted to tell this story, and they're telling me, no one's going to read that. She's like, I just want to help people. So then she ended up going with the small press who did agree with her vision. But it can be hard to know when you feel like, no, this is an authority, and they're telling me what I have is not good. I mean, it's just one opinion, but it feels really big in that moment, especially when you might still be in the self-loathing phase. Or you're like, am I over my head? Do I really know what I'm doing here? And someone's like, no, you don't know what you're doing here. It's very easy to just walk away, but you shouldn't. Your story's worth telling.
Well, tell me a little bit now. You obviously, your daughter inspired you to write a lot of your books. So I want to talk a little bit about just why you decided to write in the genre that you chose to write in. So you write children's books, but they're have a little bit of a twist, yes?
Yes. Well, I started out, I had some digital picture books when she was very young. Those are all defunct
Hmm.
now. That publisher was sold and they just got rid of us. So, oh well, it happens. So the other one that came to me in a dream in college, I was really heavily into young adult literature myself. That was my favorite thing to read. It was not as dark and depressing as adult books. I felt like every adult book was just like a middle-aged divorced woman who's trying to redefine her life. It's like, aren't there any other people in the world? Come on. So the YA books, they had the space battles, they had the goth guy and the cheerleader, and they explore how they can find common ground. Like, this stuff is fascinating. And it was quicker and easier to read than heavier adult books or even boring adult books. So that's what I decided. That was the direction I wanted to go in. I was also probably hanging on to my youth a little because I'm like, that much older than a teenager, obviously. I know what that's like. And now having a teenager, it's like, Mom, no,
Well,
no.
things have changed a lot since we were teenagers.
Yes, definitely. So I really liked doing that. And it's interesting because, as you said, I'm very cheerful. I'm a very cheerful person. Like, my trademark is my big smile. I'm in customer service. I've been in customer service forever. So you walk up to the desk and you get how can I help you today? That's me. And then I write like this bizarre, slightly twisted, dark stuff. Like, not really dark because I myself can't handle gore and like full on horror, but I like the what if of these things. So I have like some short ghost stories, my Dream Girl duology, because that's more fun to have than a trilogy. It's about dream worlds and government conspiracy. So I feel like I channel anything that's dark in my life into these stories, and then I can maintain my cheerful, pleasant self. But I like to think that some people are like, this came out of you. What are you really thinking about? And, don't worry about it.
This connects a little bit to something that one of our other episodes, also on children's authorship, went into, and the interviewee in that episode said to me something, and I said back to her, it kind of resonated with both of us, that writing a children's book or writing a young adult book is as much about writing it for the adult as it is about writing it for the child, and about writing it for the relationship between those two people. What do you have to say about that?
Yes, definitely. Because I learned firsthand as a parent that your child wants to read a book a lot of times.
Mhm.
So if you're just like, oh, this is like a hokey, cheesy, stupid story, you know, you don't want to read it. That's when you hear the parents that are like, oh, that book disappeared. Let's pick out a new one from the bookshelf. But if you can write something that also appeals to the adult as well as the child, working on two different levels there, then the parent will be just as excited to pick up that book and read it for the 500th time as the child, who's learning the cadence of language and how stories work and identifying the photos or the illustrations as going with the story. And you're like, no, this is just funny, or this is sarcastic. Even with like children's television these days, I think that's why everybody loves Bluey. It
Yeah,
works for adults very well as the children.
I agree with that, and that helps build the relationship as well, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, because you can see you're both enjoying the same thing. You
Mhm.
don't have to be with just mind numbing, let's do the ABCs over and over and over and over, So you can relate to it on one level without feeling like you have to put on the fake, yay, I love this book too. The cat on the mat. How about that? When you can both come to it with enthusiasm, then you can create a legitimate memory, and your kid knows the difference. I mean, we think we can trick them. In some ways, we can for a while, but when it comes to like, oh yeah, let's read this again, the enthusiasm is not there as when you're like, I really love this book, let's share it together. I mean, that's the cozy memories people like to have. I remember curling up on my granddaddy's lap and we read this particular book. Like, a lot of people have memories like that. And as a librarian, I'm a children's librarian now. One of the things we did this past summer for a gigantic summer reading was I asked everyone on the staff, what is your favorite children's book? And
Mm.
everyone on the staff got involved with this. Like, a lot of times they feel like, oh, let the librarians deal with the books and not the shelvers or the checkout people. But everyone was like, oh my gosh, it's this book, this picture book that I still have my dog-eared copy. It's all ratty, but I've had it for 40 years. And I share it with my grandkids now. It's like something about those children's books just sticks with you forever. Like that first magical experience of a book that makes you go, wow, and you never forget it, no matter who you are. So being able to write those memories for people is incredible.
What's your favorite?
Oh man, the one that came to mind for me was a Mercer Mare, one of the little critter ones. There
Mm.
was Just a Snowy Day. That one blew my mind because it was also a touch and feel book. And I remember like there was a little sled you could pull down the hill and a little rubber boot you could rub. And the best part of it was a scratch and sniff hot cocoa at the end of the book. So you get to scratch it and it smelled so good. And then my parents would make me a cup of hot cocoa. So
See that's the kind of thing that I think a children's book really gives you is those visceral memories that you can connect in and build out on.
yeah, I mean, you're instantly transported. Like they say, smell triggers memories like that, but a child's book, I think you can also pick that up and you can remember, man, I was sitting in grandma's house when I found this book on her bookshelf, or I was sitting on my mom's lap and we read this book together. Like it just creates the whole world around you again. And hopefully for most people, it's a warm, fuzzy, happy place that they can go back to.
Awesome. Well, as we kind of start to wind down a little bit here, I always ask a question of our guests. And there's a lot of good information that you've already given us, but what's a golden nugget? What's something that you feel that anybody can use that's starting to approach this and saying, well, I want to write a children's book, or even our nonfiction authors? Don't feel left out, ladies and gentlemen. Those of you that are thinking about writing a nonfiction book or a business book, many of the ideas and many of the Gerald, you can edit that down a little bit. Much of the advice that we have here today is applicable for both nonfiction and fiction. So what do you feel like our audience would be left with?
I feel like people need to be empowered to trust themselves.
Mm.
There's a lot of self-doubt. I don't know if that's just a trait of people that want to write. So if you're thinking, I want to write a book about, business marketing, but am I really the top expert on business marketing? Like, you know what? If you're thinking about it, you're probably well ahead of most of the people out there anyway. So do it. Take notes. Don't shoot yourself down before somebody else gets a chance to, really. Because there's a lot of obstacles. There's a lot of things you're going to face. So just go ahead and feel like I can do this. I mean, look at all the books there are in the world. There's a lot of us that are doing it. Why shouldn't it be you too? So don't stop yourself before you get started, and try not to pay attention to the negative voices. Harder to do.
It's easy to do with help, though.
Yeah.
Sort of easy. I say that. That's not entirely true.
Yeah. Try not to read. I have a friend whose husband somehow made an app for her that filtered out all reviews that were less than 3 stars. So she can use his app and be like, look, everyone loves my books. So maybe not everyone can do that, but still, like, you don't have to go to the reviews. Or have someone just someone close to you be like, if you see any 4s and 5s, just pass those along. Make your team of people that will support you, because there are people out there, and trust yourself. You have an idea, you have the ability to research. You can do this.
Well, we've got our soundbite for the day there, ladies and gentlemen. We told you she was cheerful. All right, SJ, I know that you also write under the name Alana Oxford, so that is that's actually what we have here on the meeting today. So tell us a little bit about where our audience can find you under both of those names and what they can do to continue to engage with you.
Both of those names are available from my main website, which is sjlomas.com. That's always going to be together. So SJ sticks around for the creepier stuff, the darker stuff. And Alana Oxford is for the happy little rom-coms that came out of my brain during the pandemic because it was too dark and depressing. I just needed a happy little place to disappear. So that's what I did. But now that the world's coming back, it's dark and creepy again. So now SJ is writing more stuff. But everything is there, sjlomas.com. Lists my various social media sites there too.
Wonderful. And those links are down below, ladies and gentlemen. Well, I know a secret. I know her actual name, but I'll still, SJ, I really appreciate you being here. It was a pleasure. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, we've known each other for a long time, but it's amazing how when you're an author, you're able to circle back on relationships that you've had that for many, many, many years in the past. You might find ways in which the two of you can work together. In anybody can do this, whether it be through joint ventures or just like this, having someone on a podcast. So here is the power of a book. Two old friends that used to talk on America Online with that before the conversation began, coming back, circling back more than 20 years later to be able to do business with each other and help each other's brands. So I thank you so much for that. I think it's a wonderful lesson for our audience that I'm adding in the end there just on my own.
The heartwarming end to everything. If I could hug you and we could fade out on that.
I know. Well, there'll be time for that later. I've been traveling more, so we'll catch up. All right. Well, thank you very much for being here. And yes, as I always say, we wish you the best of luck in the future.
Thank you for having me. It's been a lot of fun.